Hi guys, it's Sadie's here, and today we're going to be talking about engaging fourth grade read alouds that will spark a love for reading in your classroom. I am a firm believer in doing read alouds in upper elementary, and it's actually a really great time for students to hear what successful reading sounds like, and really just a time for you to have class discussions and chill. I like to have snack time during this time, and students are reading along, following along with me, and sometimes joining me in the reading. So we're going to talk about what read aloud time looks like in an upper elementary classroom, my upper elementary fourth grade classroom, and we're going to be I'm going to be introducing some titles that I've read with my students and talking about some that I actually want to incorporate this year and for future years to come. So if that sounds interesting to you, please keep watching. So the first book that I begin my year with is called The One and Only Ivan by Catherine Applegate, and I read this book, I think this will be my fourth year, and it has been such an exciting and beautiful and emotional read aloud for my kiddos and I. It has led discussions about activism and animal rights, and it is a narrative fiction book, and it is in the perspective of Ivan, a gorilla who lives in the Big Top Mall. So as you can imagine, a gorilla who is, held captive in a mall, away from his, true life, has a lot of feelings, and there's a new animal that's introduced to the mall act, and it sparks a sense of activism within Ivan, and he tries to hatch a plan to leave the Big Top Mall. So I recommend this. It is like around 200 and something pages, but it's such a short, quick read because it's in the language, the voice, the format of what a gorilla would think. So it's very short and sweet, and it is a great book to spark some great discussions in your classroom. So that is the first one that I start my year off with, and like I said, students usually have the copies in front of them, and I've used, my own money. I've asked my principal to get class copies because we're doing our read aloud, and it has worked out for me. One of the things that I want to say is to make it fun, I've made read aloud also snack time. So as we're reading this book together, students are eating their snack, and it's usually after a heavier subject. So I usually do it after reading, math, or writing, because it just gives a chance for the students to, chill, relax. It's such a great time for all of us, and a lot of the books that I'm going to talk about today are kind of emotional, whether it's you're happy for the character or you're sad for them. So it's a great time to just bond with your kids because there's a lot to talk about. So the next text that I have is called The City of Ember. So I actually just finished reading this book today, and I also realized, and I know that they have a graphic novel which I'm going to be reading as well. So this book is so awesome. It's giving what is it called? Why am I blanking out? It's giving Hunger Games, kind of dystopian vibes, and it's really awesome, and I love that it has a graphic novel for some of my visual people out here. I love graphic novels. So let's read the back since I actually have the text with me. It is said that the City of Ember is the only light in the dark world. Without Ember's great lamps, the darkness would last forever. Now the lights are flickering and the supplies are running low. When Lena and Dune find a mysterious document that might hold the answer, they must decipher its meaning before it's too late. Since 2003, readers all over the world have been captivated by her story about a doomed city and the two children determined to find a way out. So this is a really, really awesome book. It is you don't know what's going, you're at the edge of your seat. You want to find out what's going on. It ends in a crazy cliffhanger, which I wish it didn't, but it gets student excited. And what's great about actually both The One and Only Ivan and The City of Ember, there are multiple books to the series. So what I tend to do is I like to buy the whole series and tell students, well, if you really like this or you want to find out more, we have the books in our library so that you can enjoy and read it on your independent time or during your independent reading. And it gets students excited for reading because they're like, oh, we just read this. I'm so excited to find out what's coming next. So City of Ember, I think it has like 4 titles, and The One and Only Ivan has 3. It has The One and Only Ivan, which is the one I talked about today, The One and Only Bob, and The One and Only Ruby. And I love all the books, and City of Ember is such an exciting read, even for me as a 27-year-old. And they have a graphic novel, so you can definitely get students intrigued by this one. And I would consider that like science fiction, because in 4th grade, in the science unit, there's a whole unit about energy and wave and information. So this would be such a great connection to include in my project-based learning units, because they have to figure out a way to keep the lights on in the City of Ember. So I really enjoy this one. It has a lot of scientific connections, and I feel like The One and Only Evan has a little bit more of writing connections, because you could talk about figurative language that's used in the text, as well as the writing style in which Ivan talks and shares information with the author, or the reader, I should say. So yeah, such a great one. I recommend it 10 out of 10 for all the ones that I'm going to be talking about today. So the next book that I'm going to be talking to you guys about is Number the Stars by Lewis Lowry, and this book is based on the events of the Holocaust, World War II, and it follows a young girl, Anne-Marie, who is trying to help her friends who are Jewish escape from the Nazis in Germany. So actually it's in Copenhagen, and it's another beautiful text that talks about kindness and standing up for others, and it's really great to give students context when it comes to historical fiction books. That's why I also do, along with this Read Aloud, historical fiction book clubs, which I'll make a separate video about, because I love book clubs. And it's just a great way to talk about rights and historical events that have happened previously that are still affecting people today. One of the things I really love about this book is that it's not only short and sweet, but also it goes into a lot of detail, and it's actually from the perspective of a child. It's really interesting to see it from a child's point of view, me reading as an adult, to see a lot of the things that were happening and some of the connections, and there's a lot of inferencing that needs to be made because it's from a child's point of view. I really love it. It's a classic book. One of the things that I recommend is to mix in some classic books and some new books when you're doing a read aloud in any grade, actually, because I feel like sometimes you just need to read the classics, but also you want to be culturally responsive and make sure that the books that you're choosing, students can see their selves reflected and represented, and if not, their interests are reflected in the read aloud. If you're looking for a read aloud that's poetry based, I really love Shaking Things Up. It's a poetry anthology about different women, different visionaries in the world. I've also heard about a different book, which I have to remember, but I'll put a picture here, that's also great for poetry in upper elementary, and I'm going to be reading that soon. It's on my list to read. So those two I think are really great for 4th grade, and poetry is such a great way to get students to express themselves and voice their opinions, and I really value student voice, so a lot of the times I want to teach them about visionaries and people who have made changes because they spoke up and they were true to themselves. So those 2 books are really great for poetry units. The next one is it's a unit that I love to teach. It's actually my favorite. I tend to teach it at the end of the year or towards the end in May or June. And the book is called Greek Myths for Young Children. And this book is old as well. It's hard to when I first wanted to do a mythology unit, which I will be moving into my 3rd year of doing a mythology unit, I wanted to find a book that had a bunch of stories together, because Greek mythology is pretty darn cool, and students love it and love to learn about different gods and goddesses and how, you know, people made sense of the things that were happening around the world. So this book is really great because it has awesome stories that I think are sometimes shocking to students. They're like, oh, that's how like thunder happened, or that's what happened with Zeus and his father. So that's really an exciting one. I've also had this book right here, and I've used it during Greek mythology. It's a pretty thick book that I got at Five Below, and I've heard that a lot of teachers in 4th and 5th grade use it in the Greek mythology units. One thing that I really love to do when pacing out my read alouds is to make sure they're connected to a certain subject area. So whether it's a reading or writing unit, social studies or science, sometimes even math if you can get creative. But yeah, it just makes it easier because it all connects, and then I'm able to teach into some of the skills and review them. So for example, in the Greek myths for children, around that time, students are writing imagined narrative texts or essays that have Greek gods and goddesses as like the characters. So I was able to work with you know, my colleagues and my teammates to really make sure all of these things are blending, and it doesn't seem like read alouds are separate from reading and writing, because they're really not. You can integrate it. You can totally make it separate. That's okay. But then it doesn't feel so overwhelming. It just feels like, okay, great, let's talk about inferences in this section, or let's talk about figurative language or character traits or anything that pops up that is standard space. It makes it flow really well if you connect it to a subject area, which I love to do. The next one is one that I really want to introduce this year so bad. It's a book that made me cry, and it's called The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, and it's an adventure fiction book. It follows a China rabbit dog, and it is his journey on getting back to his owner. And this, you know, story has a lot of love, loss again, and it's such an emotional roller coaster, and it truly is his journey. And you see it from his perspective as a toy. But this book is so great. I really would like to read it. It's such an incredible journey. It really is an odyssey of this toy that's trying to get back to his home. Amazing, beautiful, like literally amazing. It's another great narrative text that's good for reading and writing, and there's a lot of figurative language and a lot of things that you could talk about that touch upon the standards, a lot of character traits too. So those are the ones that I plan on introducing this year, but I do have some honorable mentions that I want to get to. But before that, I want to just give you some tips on how to make it work. So as you can see throughout introducing the text, I kind of been giving you tips and tricks, but here are some of the last ones that I have. So actually, I kind of said them all, right? But I'm just going to reiterate them. So I, you know, give each student a copy. It could also be digital, by the way. During the pandemic, I worked with, you know, my remote and in-person class, and I did read alouds virtually, or digitally, and I would just find videos on YouTube, or I would like Google it. So I would say like the One and Only Ivan PDF, and then I would be able to get it on like a laptop or a tablet if I can't get, you know, if I don't have the resources or I can't get the physical books in time. Also, you can do the teacher displays the text. So sometimes during my read alouds, I read like cutesy, like positive affirmation books, and my students don't have like the physical copy in front of them, but I just put it on the document camera, and that works too. But, you know, sometimes having the book in front of you is just great because the students are able to, you know, follow along with you, and they could, you know, if you're feeling tired and you need to get water, the students can pick up where you left off. It usually takes me anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. Sometimes we've gone a little less or a little more, depending on how our schedule looks like for the day. But pretty much I tend to stick to 10 minutes. 15 at most, just because I want to make sure I have time for everything else. Students love it. It's a quick transition, and it's an awesome time. I usually display my read alouds on a bookshelf, and it says, you know, the title, Number the Stars, The One and Only Ivan, whatever the book I'm reading, and I just love it, guys. These books are so great. Last but not least, I do want to say that when students hear an adult model, they develop reading skills and they also develop fluency, right? What does it fluency sound like? So when you're reading to them, they're like, oh, that's what it's supposed to sound like. And you can inspire, spark a love for reading. So before I head out, I just want to talk about some honorable mentions that I've kind of been keeping my eye on, and I definitely want to read them. You don't have to read the book before you do a read aloud, but I like to do it just because I want to know. But when I first taught or read One and Only Ivan with my students, I didn't read it beforehand, and I literally it was during the pandemic, I was like reading the book like this, and I was like tearing. I'm like, oh my god, like this book is so sad at the end, but like happy sad, you know, like tears of joy, kind of. Anyways, here are my honorable mentions. So the first one that we have is called The Morning Tribe, which I'm actually going to be reading this year because it has a connection to some of the scientific topics that my students write informational texts about. And it's a graphic novel by John Lennon's son, and it has indigenous characters and talks about saving the climate change and all that stuff. So I definitely want to read that because I want to read a graphic novel so bad with my students. So I figured The Morning Tribe would be great. The next one is one that I have a physical copy of, and it's called A Whale of the Wild. This is on my TBR list, to be read list, just because I love orca whales and I think they're super cool. Got this from Target. It's $8, and it's by Roseanne Perry, and she's the one who wrote A Wolf Called Wander and Pax, which is a popular book in 4th grade as well. But this one is like about killer whales and their journey, and it's about climate. So I definitely want to read this one to my class. It is a thick book, so I don't know if I'm going to get to it this year, but I do want to read as many chapter books as possible. So this one's on my honorable mentions. I also have The Wild Robot, which looks like this, and I've read a lot about this, and I know for the most part it is about a robot who gets like put on an island and he has to like basically survive. That's what I mostly know. And that one sounded interesting to me. The next one is Wish, and this one I've heard a lot about too. It's about a girl who, I think like some like things happen to her in her personal life, and she finds a dog, and they become best friends. I'm not doing a good job summarizing them, even though I looked up the like plot last night. I'm not doing the best, but Wish looks interesting. The cover is very intriguing, and I just think it's adorable. Anything with animals, I'm a big fan of, and I think kids are too. I have 2 more. The next one is Harry Potter. So I read Harry Potter, parts of it, I should say, like about half of the book 2 years ago, before I read The One and Only Ivan, and my kids became Potterheads. I'm a Potterhead, so I wanted to incorporate Harry Potter in some way, shape, or form. And it's probably the coolest read aloud that you can do, because after that you can like do a room transformation. So if you follow me on TikTok, you'll see that I did that with my students 2 years ago, and there's so many things that you can do that are Potter or Harry Potter theme. I definitely recommend that one, although it's such a big book. So I know a lot of people also in upper elementary and even middle schools and high schools have been doing one chapter Friday or chapter sampling Fridays, where on Friday they read one chapter of a book and they're like, if you like it, continue reading it. And I kind of like that idea, so I might do that for these books and see if my kiddos like them or not. Next one is called Crenshaw, and it is a boy who has an imaginary friend. I think he's a cat named Crenshaw, to help him kind of get through some traumatic things as a child. I think they are going through a lot of family issues where they're about to be evicted from their home and they're poor, they don't have enough money. So he kind of like, tries to create an imaginary friend to help him get through that. So I heard a lot of good stuff about that one too, and I actually have a copy in my classroom that I can't wait to read. So I hope you guys found this video somewhat informative, and I hope that you'll use one of these read alouds. If you do, let me know which one kind of stands out to you. Read alouds are so important and so special to me. I love having the one-on-one time with my students to just talk about literacy and books, and it really has sparked a joy in reading in my classroom, and I can't wait to maybe sample some of these out this year to see if my kiddos would like to read them. Student voice and choice is so important, so if you can do that, I know that will go a long way with your students as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.